Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a really rich and complex set of philosophical and, well, theological waters. All of it's extracted from a 1977 speech by Sun Moon, and it's titled Our Destined Relationship.
And yet right away, that title is important.
It
The
is.
source material really makes a point that the Korean term for relationship isn't just,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a casual thing. It implies something we are inherently born for or destined to meet.
Destined to realize. Yeah.
Exactly. And that nuance, it really sets the scope for what we're doing here today. We aren't just summarizing history. We're grappling with these fundamental existential questions that the speech raises.
Like, how do we know God exists?
Right. And if God does exist, what's the purpose of suffering, of hardship? And most critically, how are our individual destinies all woven together into one single pattern?
So our mission here is to synthesize these incredibly dense arguments, to translate them into concepts that are, memorable for you, the learner. And to kick things off, the speaker uses this highly accessible but surprisingly profound metaphor. Okay, let's unpack this. And that metaphor is water.
Water is just the perfect starting point. It immediately connects the microscopic to the cosmic. The source asks you to think about a river or a lake.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at that body of water, you see one thing. It's a superficial understanding. But you're missing and this is a quote, the rich and varied backgrounds of every single drop in there.
It paints this incredible, almost romantic picture of a droplet's journey.
It really does.
Imagine water starting in a mountain spring, tumbling down a chaotic stream, then evaporating over, say, Belvedere, New York, and then it travels thousands of miles as a cloud and finally rains down in Korea, and maybe it becomes part of the water someone else drinks, decades later.
And the source makes this really powerful claim that everything in existence, even something as simple as water, prefers a life of activity and adventure.
Over just sitting still.
Over stagnation, exactly. And what's fascinating is how quickly that analogy pivots from, hydrology to human value. Think about those drops of water. Some of them just float a monotonous course, across flat plains, never met any resistance.
Easy journey.
Very easy journey. But others experienced what the speech calls chaotic situations. Tumbling violently down mountainsides, plunging over Niagara Falls, rushing through rapids.
Those drops, the chaotic ones, they've earned a richer history. They have scars, you could say.
Precisely. The core message is that whoever has had more, deeper, and more varied experiences, especially those involving intense hardship, well, they have more to tell, more to contribute, and ultimately greater value.
And this applies across the board.
Across the board, to individuals, to nations, and even to how spiritual depth is measured in the spirit world.
But I have to ask a question that I'm sure you, the learner, are thinking about. Is the source just? Is it glorifying suffering for its own sake? Because that seems like a dangerous path.
That's a great question.
I mean, if I just endure pain without any understanding, does that automatically make me spiritually richer?
And that is the critical point of clarification the speech provides. No, the value is not in the pain itself. The ultimate value, the nobility of the experience, is determined entirely by the purpose behind it.
The purpose, okay.
If you suffered for a specific, higher, unselfish goal, that suffering becomes a deep asset. If it was just random misfortune, totally unrelated to a greater purpose, its values diminish. The purpose has to come first.
That makes the distinction really concise. Nobility isn't accidental, it's intentional. And, okay, if we accept that suffering gets its value from purpose, we have to ask, where does that purpose come from?
Exactly. And that forces the transition into the grand argument for a superior intelligence.
Yeah.
The source directly challenges materialist ideology, particularly the idea that the universe just evolved randomly from pure energy.
Right. And the critique is it's like an economic or a thermodynamic principle. The speaker argues that in any system, the energy output has to be smaller than the input. You can't just keep spending more than you earn.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the universe is constantly developing, becoming more complex, generating more fruitful energy. How does that happen if the source was just pure energy that dissipates?
It creates a philosophical vacuum. The source contends that simple energy cannot be the first cause. Energy requires action, and action requires the interaction of two entities, a duality.
The duality.
The speaker labels them the subject and the object, or, just plus and minus.
So the interaction, the relationship itself, is the engine that creates the energy, not the other way around.
It is. It's an operating system based on reciprocity. Think of it like a universal law. Love, for instance. You can't manifest love standing alone.
Yeah.
Love only becomes real It only generates that powerful emotional energy when there's a partner, an object to receive and reflect it. So the subject-to-object relationship has to be the blueprint that came before the energy itself.
And this principle of interaction is then applied to the whole cosmos. We see everything from atoms to planets in circular motion. Why circular?
Because circular motion is the only geometry that results in unending, perpetual give and take. It's self-sustaining.
Ah, okay.
If the universe operated in a straight line, it would just burn out. It would exhaust its energy and stop. But the circular path ensures this endless exchange, which guarantees perpetual existence
Oh.
and growth.
And this leads directly to the core challenge
Against random evolution.
right, random evolution.
Because if organisms are, programmed to stop growing at a certain point, then how do you get higher, more complex entities? The source just calls the theory of random evolution certainly nonsense.
Yeah.
It argues instead that growth has to come from a chain reaction of give and take, always producing greater, more fruitful energy.
Building on itself.
Exactly. And if the universe operates on this subject-object principle, then we have to define the ultimate subject. And God, then, is defined as the gigantic superplus or supersubject. And we, as human beings, are microcosms of that principle.
And that explains the internal struggle we all feel, doesn't it? The individual is a small minus. Our physical body is the minus, rooted in the earthly world, seeking carnal satisfaction. But our soul, our spirit, that's the plus. And it's always striving for unity with that ultimate superplus, with God.
That pull, that constant spiritual discontent that keeps us searching beyond just physical comfort, that's seen as proof of a pre-existing higher subject we are destined to connect with. And because we're microcosms, we're inherently incomplete on our own.
Right. The speaker says it very clearly. No single person, man or woman, can be 360 degrees perfect. They can only ever cover 180 degrees.
And the other 180 degrees requires the partner. Love is the power that kicks off that interaction.
Yeah.
Allows the two 180-degree entities to unite, striving for a completely round interaction.
A perfect exchange. A perfect, unending exchange that mirrors the attributes of God's true love, which is described as permanent, pure, and beautiful.
It's a really complete, self-consistent system. It connects atomic movement, human desire, and divine love, all through one central law. Now, moving from that philosophical framework to something tangible, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the speaker argues that the physical design of our bodies gives us indisputable, visible evidence of this whole system.
Yes. The source material argues that the human body itself, just the fact of it, proves a giant thinker existed before existence. I mean, if you were an architect, you wouldn't start pouring concrete until the blueprint had solved all the functional problems.
Of course not. Let's take the eye as the first example.
Yeah.
It's so easy to take for granted, but the speaker focuses on these tiny, complex systems built right in.
Exactly. Why is the eye constantly moving? Why do we blink without thinking about it? Why is there a layer of moisture? And what about eyelashes?
To design the eye that way required understanding ahead of time that animals need vision, that the sun provides light and heat, and critically, that air evaporates moisture. All of that had to be known before the eye was ever created.
So the need, the environment, the solution, all of it was intellectually present in the first cause, before the physical thing existed. This cuts right back to that classic dilemma, which came first, existence, matter, or thought?
And the source is unequivocal on this. Existence cannot come first. Matter does not spontaneously generate a blueprint that can solve future problems. So there must be a superior intelligence, a first being or first cause, that existed logically and functionally before any other physical existence.
The speaker uses the human body as a, quote, walking museum of God to really drive this home. Let's consider some more design details. You wouldn't design a house with the front door facing a wall, right? So why do we have two eyes facing front, giving us one focused field of vision?
Or why are the nose holes positioned facing down to protect us from dust and rain, not facing up?
It seems so obvious once you point it out.
The source insists that every single placement, 2 ears, 2 eyes, nose down, was deliberate. It served a purpose that existed before the physical form. The argument is particularly vivid when it discusses aspects of the female body. The source points to women's breasts, which were designed specifically for feeding children. That's a function realized only after the baby comes, yet the design was complete from the very start.
It's a very compelling, practical argument for pre-design. And the logical extension of all this intentional, complex design is that every individual is priceless.
That's the emotional conclusion of this whole segment. The speaker contrasts two people looking in the mirror. One praises God's masterpiece and the other complains, oh, I'm so ugly.
Huh.
The message is that because you are the result of this magnificent, complex blueprint, you are unique and you are priceless. No one can reproduce the precise combination of experiences and physical design that is you.
And the source uses a particularly powerful visual anecdote to illustrate the beauty of this intended diversity, highlighting a specific combination of color.
Yes. The speaker claims that if you want to see the most beautiful human face, it is a black person's face when they laugh, specifically citing the stunning contrast of black lips, white teeth, and a red tongue.
Wow.
It's used as definitive evidence of colorful, deliberate design that maximizes beauty through contrast and blending.
Okay, so with that blueprint established, we now have to shift. We're moving from the cosmic design to the specific mission that's outlined in the speech, which is the path toward racial unification and the movement's engagement with earthly power structures in 1977.
The speaker is very clear that God desires a family of beautiful living color and that the unification of the races is a core mandate of the divine will. This isn't just about tolerance, it's an active required step.
And what's crucial to report impartially here is the specific role that's assigned to the different racial groups in this strategy. The source explicitly positions the yellow race as the middle ground, or the glue intended to harmonize the extremes that are represented by the black and white races.
And that's presented not as any kind of hierarchical statement, but as a strategic, a logical way to think about unification. How do you blend the extremes? Through a central point of mediation, the ultimate goal, the future vision. It's presented in highly dramatic terms.
Interracial marriage is described as a future noble act, where such couples will be respected as heroes and be the center of attention globally. They're destined to have a very dramatic story to tell, which mirrors that turbulent, adventurous journey of the water drops from the beginning. Their hardship and uniqueness become their greatest asset.
But, to achieve this mandate means you're going to encounter resistance. The speaker addresses this opposition directly, asserting that persecution, whether from government agencies or just, societal antagonism, it only causes the religious movement to grow faster.
Why?
Because its source of energy is entirely spiritual and vertical, not secular and horizontal.
This is where we get that analogy of the ocean versus the river.
Yeah.
The Unification Church's goals and values are compared to the vast, inexhaustible ocean, while earthly powers, like the American government or any president, are described as just a stream, or the Mississippi River.
The implication there is profound. How can a river ever hope to overcome the ocean? The ocean's values are absolute, permanent, divine. Earthly powers are temporal, they're horizontal, and they're limited.
So any opposition is ultimately futile.
And it merely strengthens the vertical commitment of the ocean's followers.
Okay, so moving to the immediate context of 1977, the source doesn't shy away from making some specific politically charged statements, which, we have to report neutrally. For instance, the speaker claimed to have advised President Nixon during his difficulties, urging him to be God-centered in his leadership.
And furthermore, the speech contains warnings about the state of America at that time, specifically criticizing the political crippling of the CIA and cautioning that the nation was moving toward self-destruction because of its ineffectiveness in the global struggle against communism.
And these critiques are presented as flowing directly from that vertical, God-centered perspective.
Right, contrasting with the secular debates happening in Washington.
This all circles back to the core asset of the movement, which is not political alignment or size. The ultimate strength, the source claims, is the commitment in the heart of the followers. And this commitment is described as the only weapon.
That weapon is the love of God, which, once it's experienced, transcends all earthly divisions. It immediately makes anyone nearby a brother or a sister, regardless of their background or race. That love is the practical force that achieves the unity mandate.
And the final beautiful symbol used to illustrate this destiny is the handshake. When white and black individuals shake hands within the church, it represents far more than two people. It symbolizes the union of the two races, and on a grander scale, the union of heaven and earth.
It connects right back to the beginning analogy, the mountain and the valley. White is compared to the snow-capped mountain peak and black to the deep valley. And the source argues that their true, lasting beauty is only fully realized when you harmoniously blend those peaks and valleys together.
Achieving a state of completeness that neither could reach alone.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? We've traced this seamless, internally consistent line of argument, starting with a drop of water, moving through the complex subject-object law governing the universe, finding physical evidence in the human blueprint, and finally applying that framework to this grand mission for global racial destiny. The essence of the transformation required seems to be an internal revolution, shifting your focus entirely from thinking only of yourself, the small minus, to thinking of God and humanity first, the super plus.
And the ultimate theological goal presented here is to become the instrument that can heal what's referred to as the broken heart of God, a heart that has suffered immense betrayal and disappointment throughout human history.
You know.
Healing this requires that internal revolution, manifested through unselfish action, enduring any persecution without complaint.
And taking on the supreme responsibility to bring both true love and true judgment to the world.
Yes.
The source material ends with a claim that really crystallizes the level of certainty and conviction behind this whole structure. It asserts that even if the entire world comes against the movement, God will lead the children of those opposers to join the cause. It says the worst revenge parents could receive is to see their own children join. This raises a fascinating point for you to reflect on. What does it mean for a movement to be so certain of its vertical spiritual backing that it views all earthly power and opposition, the government, the media, societal norms, as essentially irrelevant? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.